Have you ever found yourself completely losing your patience over something that normally wouldn't have bothered you? Maybe your husband asks one simple question, your child leaves something on the counter again, or a coworker sends just one more email, and suddenly you feel this wave of irritation, frustration, or even rage sometimes that seems completely out of proportion to what actually happened. Then comes the guilt, the shame, and you're probably wondering, what's wrong with me? If you've been feeling more angry, reactive, impatient, or emotionally overwhelmed in midlife, you're not crazy and you're not becoming a bad person. You may not even be angry for the reasons you think. Let's talk about what's really happening. Welcome back to the Whole She Rises podcast. This is episode 5 of a series called Why Midlife Women Feel This Way. Today, we're talking about something many women experience, but few women openly discuss: midlife rage. Because beneath the frustration, the snapping, irritability, and emotional overwhelm, there's often a much bigger story, and shame about what you're feeling usually keeps you silent. One of the things I hear women say all the time is, I don't recognize myself anymore. They aren't necessarily sad and they're not necessarily depressed. They're angry, short-tempered, and reactive. Everything feels irritating and their patience is just gone. We all see those social media posts that joke about perimenopause, saying things like, I wanted to stay calm today, but then my husband started chewing. And we laugh because they're funny, but also because we've lived it. What concerns me isn't that women are laughing. Laughing is great. It's that we've started believing this level of irritability is just something we have to accept. It's become normalized. And when something becomes normalized, we usually stop asking why it's happening. And what makes it even harder is that many of these women used to be the calm one, the patient one, the one who is holding everything together. So when they start feeling this way, they assume something must be wrong with them. But what if this isn't a character flaw? What if it's just some information? Part of this conversation absolutely involves hormones. As estrogen begins fluctuating during perimenopause, many women notice changes in mood regulation. Stress feels way bigger, emotions feel stronger, and patience feels way shorter. The nervous system becomes a lot more sensitive, and suddenly things that once rolled right off your back don't anymore. This isn't because you're suddenly weak, it's because your body is adapting to enormous physiological changes. And I want to pause here and say something important. If hormone therapy is something you and your healthcare provider decide is appropriate for you, that's great. I use hormone therapy myself. Many women experience significant improvement in symptoms with the right hormonal support. There is no prize for suffering through symptoms unnecessarily. There is no prize for refusing support that may actually help you. Hormones matter. Medical care matters. Good health care matters a lot. And for many women, these interventions can be incredibly valuable. I know that that is the case for so many women I know. But here's what I wish more women understood. Sometimes we expect hormones to solve problems they were never meant to solve by themselves. Because while hormones may help support the body physiologically, they don't automatically resolve years of chronic stress. They don't automatically heal burnout. They don't automatically create boundaries for you. And they don't automatically reduce the pressure we've been placing on ourselves for decades. And that's where I think many women get pretty discouraged because they start hormone therapy expecting it to fix everything. Then when they still feel overwhelmed, reactive, exhausted, or disconnected from themselves, they assume something is wrong or maybe the hormones aren't working. But often what's happening is that there are multiple layers involved. Hormones may absolutely be one piece of the puzzle, but they may not be your entire puzzle. And that's the deeper conversation I want to have today. In my experience, rage is often just a symptom. It's not the root problem. Many women have spent years carrying loads that were never sustainable. Years of people-pleasing, caretaking, over-functioning, managing everyone else's schedules, needs, emotions, while ignoring our own, holding everything together. And somewhere along the way, our bodies hit capacity. The nervous system starts saying, I can't keep doing this. But instead of exhaustion showing up first, sometimes it's irritation that shows up first. Sometimes it's anger that shows up. Sometimes it's rage, not because you're an angry person and not because something suddenly happened or changed, but because your system is overloaded. Think about your phone battery. When it's fully charged, a text message, another app opening, or one more notification doesn't really matter at all. But when it's sitting at 2%, everything coming through feels like too much. That's often what's happening inside your nervous system. It's not that the dishes suddenly became unbearable for you. It's that your internal battery has been running on empty for far too long. And I think that's a very important distinction, because one of the mistakes I made was turning a symptom into my identity. I remember going through a season where I genuinely started believing I had become a really angry person. Not a person that was experiencing anger, an angry person. And those are two very different things. I remember feeling scared by how reactive I felt, scared by how quickly irritation would start showing up, scared by how little patience I seemed to have compared to the woman I used to be. And if I'm being honest, I started wondering, who am I becoming? What is wrong with me? What if this is just who I am now? And what if I start damaging my most important relationships? What if I become someone people don't enjoy being around anymore? And what if it affects my marriage, my parenting, my work, my ability to help other people? I wasn't just afraid of the anger. I was afraid of what the anger seemed to be saying about me. But what I understand now is that a symptom is not an identity. The way you feel in a difficult season doesn't get to become a permanent label for who you are. Feeling irritable doesn't mean you are an irritable person. Feeling angry doesn't make you an angry person. And feeling overwhelmed doesn't make you incapable all of a sudden. Sometimes it simply means your body has been carrying more than it was ever designed to carry for a long time. This was a huge realization for me. Many women have spent decades overriding themselves, including me, saying yes when they mean no, taking care of everyone else before ever taking care of themselves, pushing through the exhaustion, avoiding conflict, suppressing needs. Then suddenly, in midlife, the body stops cooperating with those types of boundaries, and all those unmet needs start demanding your attention. The irritation isn't always about the dishes or the question or the text message or the chewing noises. Usually, it's years of depletion finally speaking up. Sometimes it's your body saying something has to change. One of the biggest shifts I had to make was realizing that I couldn't shame myself into feeling better. I couldn't always criticize myself for being reactive, and I couldn't beat myself up for struggling, because shame and beating myself up only added more stress. And that wasn't helping me at all. Instead, I needed to become curious. What am I needing right now? What is it that's feeling overwhelming? Where am I overextended? What expectations am I carrying for myself and for others? And what have I been tolerating for way too long? Those questions almost always revealed far more than the anger or the rage itself. Because when I got honest with myself, the anger usually wasn't the real issue. Underneath it, I often found exhaustion and pressure, resentment, and even grief, needs that I wasn't expressing well, or boundaries that I wasn't honoring. Sometimes I realized I wasn't really angry at all. I was just overwhelmed. The dishes or the questions, the email, those weren't the problems. They were simply the things that landed on top of an already overloaded nervous system. And that realization changed how I viewed myself. Because instead of saying, "What is wrong with me?" I started asking, "What is my body trying to tell me right now? What does it need?" That shift brought so much more compassion into my healing, because the goal stopped being just getting rid of the anger. The goal became understanding what the anger was trying to protect. What was it trying to communicate? What was it asking me to start paying attention to? And often I found underneath wasn't really anger at all. It was a woman who was exhausted from carrying too much for too long. A woman that needed to heal some ignored parts of herself. And over the past few years, I've started noticing something that completely changed the way I look at healing now. Our bodies are constantly communicating with us. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they nudge us a little. Sometimes they're practically waving their arms, trying to get our attention. And when we don't recognize those earlier signals, our bodies often change the language they're using. What began as fatigue becomes burnout. What began as stress becomes being completely overwhelmed. And what began as quiet depletion may eventually sound like irritability or even rage. The message hasn't changed, but the volume has. Your body isn't trying to punish you. It's trying to help you hear what it's been trying to say to you all along. The goal isn't to wait until it's shouting. If you've been experiencing more rage, irritability, frustration, or emotional reactivity lately, I want you to know something. This doesn't automatically mean you're failing, and it doesn't mean you're becoming someone you don't recognize. It doesn't mean you're broken. It may simply mean your body is asking for something different than what you've been giving it. More support, more honesty, more rest, maybe more boundaries, more compassion, more safety. And when we begin listening to those signals, instead of ignoring or fighting them, everything really does start to change. If this episode resonated with you, let me know in the comments. Have you been experiencing more irritability, frustration, or rage during midlife? I think you'll be surprised how many women can relate. And if you're navigating perimenopause, autoimmune symptoms, exhaustion, or chronic stress, make sure you're subscribed, because that's exactly what we talk about here every week. After years of chasing symptoms, answers, diagnoses, and treatments, I started getting curious about something. What if the things I thought were separate struggles, the autoimmune symptoms, chronic stress, exhaustion, hormones, even the emotional changes I couldn't explain, what if they weren't actually separate? What if they were different ways that my body was trying to communicate the very same thing to me? What if they were all part of one much bigger story? That's exactly where we're going next. In our next series, we're going to start connecting those dots together. And before you go, watch this episode next, because understanding that part of my story will help make some sense of what we've discussed throughout this series. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Take care of yourself. Trust your body. Stay curious, and let's rise together.